G'day everyone, welcome back to another tipping video on the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be going over my tips for round 3 of the 2023 AFL season. If you're going to enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, that'll be much appreciated. And let's kick it off with my tips from last week. So after a terrible first round, scoring a 3 out of 9, we managed to do a bit better, 5 out of 9, and the Sunday games really did save my bacon. Went with the Cats for the first tip, thought they'd get it done, but how about the Blues? They were very good in the midfield, and especially down forward. 𝐴𝐿𝐼𝐻 and 𝐴𝐿𝐼𝐻 were linking oh so well. Thought the Demons would get it done up at the Gabba, but the Lions, as I did say in my tipping video from last week, I could see them get back to the best at their fortress, and to be fair, now they can really start to build off that, and their clearance game was elite on Friday night. Stuck with the Pies. I thought just, had their style at the moment, their exciting style. Their transition would be too good for Port Adelaide. I thought it would be a lot closer of a game, but they absolutely smashed them. Went with the Crows at home, but they were not good enough at all. They could not kick straight, and they just got battered with a lot of repeated entries from the Tigers. Then tipped the Saints, which I'm pretty content with this tip. A handful of people probably went with the Bulldogs, but I just had the faith in St Kilda to go 2-0. Their defensive pressure, how they structure, and especially around the ball, is very good, and they got it done very convincingly. Went with Fremantle. I said it was a safe tip, but 𝐓𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐼𝐻, North Melbourne, 𝐿𝑑𝑢 was best on ground again, but Freo were bloody poor, and 𝐓𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐼𝐻 with a huge upset win over in the West. Stuck safe with the Swans, thought they'd get a big win, and they sure did do that. I liked Essendon's chances at home. They usually play their best footy at Marvel Stadium at home, and this was a goal-for-goal sort of affair, but the Dons were too good in the end, and went with the Eagles. I stuck with West Coast. A few people were against me with that one. A lot of people going with the Giants, but I just felt in front of that home crowd, they get things clicking, and they were very impressive, especially going inside 50. So 5 out of 9 for round 2. Hopefully we can do better this week. Okay, now my tips for round 3. Some pretty interesting matchups we've got this weekend. We kick it off with Thursday night, the Western Bulldogs taking on the Brisbane Lions at Marvel Stadium. Now, this time last year, the Bulldogs were pretty much in the exact same situation. They started off 0-2 against some pretty good opposition, and they managed to get the win. I think it was against the Sydney Swans in round 3. So, to be honest, since this game here is at home, I can see them sort of having that inspirational performance and really getting back into the swing of things and picking up a very solid win against a very good opponent of the Brisbane Lions. There's just so much upside on that list. The talent on paper is very good. Bontempelli and McRae have really got a lift in that midfield, and the ball use was just very boring and bland last week, so I think they've got to get back to the drawing board and just be a bit more bolder with their play in the corridor. But the Lions away, I think they're going to be better away this year. Can't really say that with the poor performance against Port Adelaide, but I just think, especially in Victoria, they played decent at Marvel, and their clearance game from last week too was very strong. I think this will be a pretty heavily contested game. Both are very good at clearances, both are very good with the contested possessions, so I think there'll be a lot of stoppages, probably a bit of a low scoring sort of affair. Look, I think for me, the Lions away, they just have a bit more class at the moment. I still don't know about the Bulldogs, just the tall situation and, playing a few players in the wrong position. Their game plan is just... it's just a bit of a question mark at the moment, whilst the Lions, if they can continue with that clearance game from last week, their defence last week from most of that game was pretty strong too, so I think they can continue with that, and I'm going to be going with the Lions here away. Brisbane Lions will get it done away, and we'll go with the Lions by 17 points. Friday night footy, we do have the Magpies taking on the Richmond Tigers at the MCG. Cracking match up here. The Pies are one of the most exciting teams in the competition at the moment. Flag favourites. Yeah, a lot of hype around them, media-wise, fan-wise, social media-wise. So, with me, I want to take a step back and not try buy into the hype too much, but you can't go wrong with them at the same time because they look flawless in multiple aspects. The role players are playing great football. Their corridor use and the overlapping handballs are looking fantastic too. But on the other side of the coin, the Tigers... I've improved their contested game a little bit more. I think Taranto, yes, impact-wise and disposal efficiency-wise, he hasn't been too great, but he has been pretty good in the clearance game. And especially the Tigers have been able the past 2 weeks to have a lot of those repeated entries inside 50, but with a few times they weren't so efficient. But I think last week against the Crows, they were very good in terms of hitting the scoreboard. Compared from round 1 against the Blues, I think they kicked around 13 goals throughout some time period of that game. So I think this is a very good test for the Pies in terms of their defence, because I think Richmond, with their forward half turnovers and just their repeated entries, they're very good at doing that. So it is really going to test the Pies' defence. But I still question about Richmond's defence sometimes. Obviously, last week they leaked in a few too many goals. That's probably their weakness at the moment. But yeah, for me, the Pies... I just got to keep on tipping them at the moment. They're probably the most tippable team at the time of recording this video and at the time of this season. As stated before, transition game is very good. It almost looks undefendable, I guess you could say. And more importantly, they're starting to really, win the 50-50s in the midfield, win those centre clearances. So I'll be sticking with the Pies with this one. I like the Tigers though. I think they can really penetrate Collingwood's defence line with just a lot of those inside 50s. But yeah, for me, the Pies, I think this one will be a close game. I think this will be close. We'll go Collingwood by 9 points. Now for the Saturday games, we have Hawthorn taking on North Melbourne down at Launceston at the University of Tasmania Stadium. Cracking stadium, might I say. Went there last year. Pretty nice stuff. But anyways, in terms of the tips, well, for me, North Melbourne, you've got to tip them with a lot more respect now. How they managed to go over to Fremantle and Perth and knock off the Dockers, which is never easy. Especially the Fortress over there at Optus Oval was tremendous. I think they're a lot more bolder now in terms of their corridor use and their ball skills. And you can see they've improved a lot more of their contested game. Their clearance game is very underrated too. I'm pretty sure 𝐼𝐴𝐼𝐿𝐴 is going to be out with suspension, but it might leave a bit more breathing space for the likes of Luke Davies-Uniacke, and maybe Tom Powell goes into that midfield a bit more. Does McGuinness tack 𝐼𝐿𝐴? That's going to be the big question. But the Hawks are just an absolute bit of a shit show to watch at the moment. They couldn't get anything going down forward. They were missing goals left, right and centre. Their ball method down the ground was very predictable too. I think North Melbourne could potentially go 3-0 here. And yeah, I'm going to be tipping them. They just look the goods at the moment. They just have a bit higher spirits and a bit low expectations too. I think they're really enjoying their footy whilst having a very good hunt at the football too, and getting things clicking. So I'll go with North Melbourne here. Convincing result. I reckon North by 21 points. Now for GWS taking on the Blues at Giants Stadium. Usually the past few years this has been a quite of a favourable matchup for the Giants. The Blues have not really been able to play so well in Sydney the past few years, but last year they finally got it done against the Giants, I'm pretty sure, by around 20 odd points. So yeah, Carlton coming in as the favourites as expected. The Giants, well, I did predict them for the spoon this year just because I don't know about the whole chemistry of their list, and they showed the effort I think against the Eagles, but just in their defensive half they were quite poor in terms again of accountability and defensive acts. So I think the Blues will come into this game pretty confident. I think they'll be pretty bullish about this game. Again, the most important thing is Curnow Mackay have got to have that very good connection, got to have that strong link, because that's where most of their points do come from, and I think they'll be able to trump over the Giants here and get a good win right off the bat. I think I'm pretty confident in this Carlton tip. I'll go the Blues by a convincing margin of 25 points. Saturday night now, we've got St Kilda taking on the Essendon Football Club at the MCG. Now, I want to kick off by saying I did see Carl Langford do a sort of an Ed Langdon from last year saying we're coming into this game pretty confident. I forgot exactly what he said, but he's quite bullish and he's quite confident that the Dons can knock off St Kilda. So yeah, that's pretty controversial, but genuinely I think the Dons are a very good chance here. Usually the last few years they've really been able to knock off St Kilda, especially last year too, whilst the Saints were favourites. But for me, the Saints are a team that you probably want to start taking a bit seriously now, especially in terms of tips, because from the teams that I've seen so far, they're probably the best defensively drilled team. Their pressure has been very good, and they've been able to use the ball from their defensive half and use it quite well down forward. The talls get high up the ground, and their smalls, Mitch Owens is having a great season so far, great first 2 games. 𝐓𝐴𝐿𝐴 𝐿𝐼𝐿𝐴 might be very young, but they're seriously very effective so far in their early careers. And also their midfield is working very nicely. Jack Steele was quite a bit of an out for the Saints, so I think that removes a big piece from their midfield. But, in comes probably Jack Bytel, who was pretty good and probably might tag someone like a Zach Merritt or a Darcy Parish in that midfield. Even though Peter Wright is still out, I'm pretty sure Jake String and 𝐻𝐻𝐻 will be most likely back to return to this game against the Saints. So I sort of like Essendon's chances as well, because quite honestly, I think they've been a bit of a deadly team inside 50. I know they played the Hawks and the Suns, but, the likes of Aaron Davey Jr. has been pretty exciting. And I think with Jack Stringer back on that side and 𝐻𝐻𝐻, who was very good in their first game, I think it will really test St Kilda's defence. But for me, I just think I really rate St Kilda's system at the moment and their defensive structure. So I'll continue tipping the Saints. Why not? I reckon St Kilda will get it done in a good game of footy. I reckon this one will be close. Saints by 10 points. And well, this is sure to be an absolutely cracking contest. Port Adelaide versus Adelaide. Which one out of these clubs will start 0-3? You don't want to see 0-3 in either of these sides, because If it happens to Port, 𝐸𝐿 will definitely be under the pump. If it happens to Adelaide, of course, Matty Nicks will be under the pump. What, his third or fourth year into a rebuild? You don't want to start off 0-3. I think Adelaide have been quite unlucky the past 2 weeks. I know they've played poor patches of football throughout both their games, but they've been really inaccurate, and they've had some nice centre bounce work, and they've had some nice inside 50 entries, but they've just been unable to convert. So you can sort of see the upside there. Whilst for Port, maybe it was a flash in the pan against the Lions in round 1. Everything was just clicking with their contested game and their inside 50 efficiency, but that's what Port can do. They're a pretty strong contested side on their day, and when they do get things clicking, they can be a very strong side too. But at the end of the day, you can only talk about it so much. It's a showdown. I'm expecting this game to be close. This game could go either way. It is a really tough one to tip. Port Adelaide's defence was just very poor. I mean, it showed its true colours last week against the Magpies. Every time pretty much it went inside 50, they simply could not withstand the pressure and get the rebound 50s. It's a tough one. I might still stick with Port Adelaide in this one. I think, if they can get their forward half working, their contested game as well, I think that can really get over Adelaide's as well. Charlie Dixon and 𝐓𝐴𝐿𝐴, and if 𝗦𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐿𝐴 can get get going too, I might go with Port Adelaide with this one. In a close game, this one could go either way, but Port, I think, will just be a bit more strong in the contested game and in their forward half. We'll go Port Adelaide by 3 points. For the Sunday games now, we do have the Suns taking on the Geelong Cats up at Gold Coast. I was pretty bullish at the start of the year with the Suns, but they've just been disappointing. They've had a few nice patches throughout their games, but overall, I think just their entries inside 50, they've just been able to find many sparks. Ben King, they kicked to him quite a bit, but he's just unable to take a few of those contested marks. I think their smalls aren't showing enough flashiness, like, Rosas and, of course, Joel Jeffrey. They were great in the second half of last year. They've just been unable to show really anything. And look, against the Cats, because they start off 0-3, they're pretty disappointing last week against the Blues. I think they were pretty unaccountable in terms of defending, and especially their ball skills from defensive 50. The transition was very poor too. And they had to rely on a Jeremy Cameron who kicked some very difficult goals, so I don't know if that's really sustainable either. So I think you can't underestimate Gold Coast midfield. I know forward of centre, they've been pretty average, but their clearance game, their contested game is pretty strong. I think Matt Rouse had a pretty promising start to the year, but for me, look, the reigning premiers, could they start off 0-3? I can't see it. I think they're going to be a lot more harder at the football. I think they're going to show a lot more accountability, and they should be the better team on paper here. So in other words, I just can't see the Cats playing poor footy, because I think they're a better team on paper. They'll get it done on the road here against the Suns in a hard-fought win. I'll go Geelong by 17 points. Now the Demons taking on the Swans at the MCG. Like this game here, the Swans, the past 2 appearances, have been able to nick the Demons in pretty good fashion. They've really been able to get the better of the Demons in terms of their midfield and clearances, and they've been very good off the turnover with their pressure, the Swans, against the Demons. But obviously they are favourites, they're at home, and they've been predicted to have a very good year. And to be honest, their first 2 weeks, look, last week they were pretty poor. They got smacked in the centre clearances, so I think that gives the Swans a bit of hope, especially with Max Gawn out, so that does hurt a bit of their structure, especially down forward, because 𝐼𝐴𝐿𝐴 is still out, so it just removes a bit of their spark. It's hard to get a grasp yet on the Swans, because yes, they've only played really Hawthorn and Gold Coast, and now they have the big test against some top 6, top 4 quality kind of sides of the Melbourne Demons, so you can't really judge them too much from their first 2 weeks, but the Swans, look, their pressure is still there. Their hunt and their class is still there, so I think that can really get this game, and I reckon the Swans will win here. They've been pretty good against the Demons for the past few years. I think they can get on top of the clearances, and yeah, I might be going with the Swans here in a good game. I reckon Sydney will get it done by around... We'll go Swans by 11 points. And for the final game of the round, we do have the Dockers taking on the Eagles. A bit of Western Derby action. And this is a really interesting one here, because if you predict this at the start of the year, obviously you go Freo for quite the easy tip. But geez, the Eagles, they've not only gotten the win, but on the other side of the coin, the Dockers have started off 0-2, and they're just playing a very uninspiring brand of football, not very convincing or eye-catching, very bland, very basic. Their forward half just isn't working at the moment. The Darcy and, of course, the Luke Jackson combination just isn't working at the moment. As well as their smalls, they're failing to get, an output of a huge amount of points. So I think the Eagles are going to be looking at this and saying, hey, we could really pull off this upset. And to be honest, it's a Western Derby. anything could happen with this game. The Eagles had really bold movement against the Giants last week. I think their marks inside 50 and their deliveries inside 50 was beautiful. You know, Waterman kicked the bag, and of course Australian had a great day out too. Tim Kelly got a bit back to his best too. He was really heavily involved in the midfield. And with the Dockers, look, not only their forline, but their midfield was a bit concerning too. They got convincingly beaten in clearances, and they didn't really take the game on. So I think the Eagles can really turn it up here against the Dockers. And you know what? I might go the upset here. I think the Eagles, a bit higher in spirits. I reckon they'll get it done against the Dockers in a good game. We'll go West Coast by close game. 6 points. So everyone, there were my tips for round 3 of the 2023 AFL season. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you wanted to enjoy. And until next time, I will talk to you later. See you later, fellas.